revisionist history, and Ryan Tannehill. Welcome to part two, the blame game. Let's go. I'd like to welcome you back to part two in this three-part series that's going to take us into the Dolphins offseason. And before we get started, I'd like to get into a little house cleaning here. And in fact, I believe it's inevitable. And it seems to be always inevitable when we're dealing with Ryan Tannehill. There's always a revisionist history. There's always an excuse. So we're going to deal with that today before we move forward. There was a gentleman who reached out in the comments section, and he runs a channel called Touchdown Fins Talk. And this is not about antagonizing anyone. The reality is I just want to address what his comments were and try to clarify some things so we can get on the same page. As a matter of fact, I'm going to leave a link to his channel in the description below, and you guys can go and check out his channel. There's a lot of good content. He does a lot of good work, and I will never, ever question a hardcore fan. And this man is a hardcore Dolphins fan, so shout out and much respect to Touchdown Fins Talk. But we're going to deal with his comments right now. So we don't do revisionist history here. I don't like to deal in speculation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the comment on the screen, and we're going to deal with the comment the way that it's written. And we're going to deal with it in sections. So first and foremost, he said, you name everything they brought in, but that was over a 7-year period. That's absolutely true, because we're doing an analysis on what went wrong when Ryan Tannehill was in Miami. So we get to the first point of contention, which was many of these guys never played together. It was all spread out, replacing who they lost. And later on in the comment, he says that you grade last season as a good gauge when he had Adam Gase. So what we're going to do is we're going to start dealing with these excuses one by one. So let's start with many of these guys never played together and find out if that's true. So let's go down the rosters and let's see who actually played together. We're going to ignore 2017 because that was a season that Ryan Tannehill missed due to injury. And we're going to start with 2016. And in 2016, you find out that Devontae Parker, Kenny Stills, Brandon Albert, Laramie Tunsil, Juwan James, Mike Pouncey, Jay Ajayi, Damian Williams, Jarvis Landry, and Kenyon Drake were all on the same roster. In 2015, Lamar Miller, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Matthews, Kenny Stills, Brandon Albert, Mike Pouncey, Billy Turner, Jordan Cameron, and Jay Ajayi were all on the roster together. In 2014, Lamar Miller, Damian Williams, and remember this guy, Noshawn Moreno? I'd like to add him in, even though he was only there for a couple of games. Jarvis Landry, Mike Wallace, remember this guy, Brian Hartline? Brandon Albert, remember this guy, Charles Clay? Mike Pouncey, Juwan James, were all on the same roster together. So in reality, a lot of these guys did indeed play together in Miami. Now let's move on to the next point. You say also 1 year they had a good collective group was when Ryan went 8-3 and then got hurt. You can't look at personal stats to tell his story. So let's deal with that. The season you're referring to is the 2016 season when the Dolphins kind of shocked the NFL and made the playoffs in Adam Gase's first year as a coach. Let's look who was playing together. I repeat, in 2016, Devontae Parker, Kenny Stills, Brandon Albert, Laramie Tunsil, Juwan James, Mike Pouncey, Jay Ajayi, and we're going to go back to Jay Ajayi, Damian Williams, Jarvis Landry, and Kenyon Drake were all on that same roster. And I'm going to add a notable mention on that roster to Deion Sims, who was also on that roster. Now let's deal with that 8-3 record. Ryan Tannehill did not go 8-3 that season. As a matter of fact, the Miami Dolphins started out 1-4 that season. And Adam Gase made some notable cuts after that loss. And did a certain running back that I put a pin in emerge as a 200-yard rusher for multiple games? Does that cycle back to my comment about Ryan Tannehill and a power running game and a certain running back in Tennessee? So let's move on to the next point of contention. And a lot of Ryan Tannehill's apologists do this. They like to bring up Bullygate. And your comment was, what about Bullygate when half the old line got suspended? Coach gets fired for snorting cocaine. Well, The interesting thing about that is I don't think you'll find a single Dolphins fan to explain away the dysfunction that Bullygate brought in. But in reality, Ryan Tannehill apologists like to ignore practice squad gate. Why is it that Ryan Tannehill is criticizing his teammates on the practice squad for picking off his passes? Does that not sound like a sense of entitlement? Where's Ryan Tannehill's responsibility in his performance in Miami? Let's look at the reality. One of this organization's main failures was they treated Ryan Tannehill as though he were Dan Marino ever since the day he was drafted. Did it ever occur to you that there was something wrong in the fact that they never drafted a quarterback in Ryan Tannehill's entire time in Miami? He was never pressed for competition. As a matter of fact, he never won the quarterback starting job. He was getting smoked by David Garrard, and if he had not gotten injured, Ryan Tannehill would not have been the starter in Miami. Ask yourself this question. The New England Patriots have had Tom Brady for 20 years. How many quarterbacks have the New England Patriots drafted? And if they're drafting quarterbacks with Tom Brady, why weren't the Dolphins drafting quarterbacks? Isn't that a reasonable question? So I'm not here to bash Touchdown Fins Talk. Quite to the contrary, I'm here to just suggest that you follow his channel. I followed this channel for a very, very long time. The man is a passionate Dolphins fan. But the point of this entire podcast is to start to wade through the narrative that's presented by the national media and a lot of the local beat writers in Miami and try to stick with things that we can prove. Which brings us to the blame game. Touchdown Fins Talk didn't completely pick up what I was sitting down in the first podcast. And I ended that with several pictures of several former Dolphins coaches, to get to this point. I firmly believe that it's been coaching that's failed Miami for the last 10 years, actually since Don Shula left. Unlike a lot of folks who only follow the elite players, if you give me a choice between an elite quarterback or elite players at any position, I will always choose an elite coach. And why is that? Well, when you have average to adequate to poor coaching, it puts a lot of pressure on the front office to find elite athletes who are scheme diverse. Now, let me say that again. Scheme diverse. That means that this person can play in any scheme, and those guys are rare. You can't find a lot of defensive tackles in a 4-3 defense, for instance, to play nose tackle in a 3-4 defense. It's just not going to work, which brings us to the blame game. I know I mentioned earlier in the part 1 of this series about Mike Wallace blasting the Dolphins organization, and that seems to be a theme around all of the media and fans. And when you blame the Dolphins organization and say, well, the organization is trash, well, that's not specific enough. I know there's enough blame to go around, but let's be more realistic about this. When you say that the organization is trash, who are you referring to? Is it the general manager? Is it the head of scouting? Are you blaming owner Steve Ross? Well, let's try to dissect those things and see if we can come up with something, because I think you can point the finger squarely at coaching, and I agree with Touchdown Fins Talk about this. When owner Stephen Ross bought this team and took it over, there's only one thing that I point at and I think I can blame Steve Ross for. And this is just being an inexperienced owner. What he did was he tried to piecemeal all these pieces together, and he never really took it down to the rafters or put one voice in control since Bill Parcells. He would fire a general manager but keep the coach, fire the coach and keep the general manager. And if you look at 2019, this is exactly what the Miami Dolphins have done. They have burned it all the way down to the foundation. We're not going to deal with everybody, but what we're going to do is we're just going to stick with Joe Philbin. Joe Philbin was supposed to be the offensive-minded guru who was going to bring Green Bay's offense and develop Ryan Tannehill. He was supposed to be the man that developed Aaron Rodgers. And a lot of us found that difficult to believe, considering he never called his own plays in Green Bay. I just want to cycle back and touch on Stephen Ross again real quick, because one thing Stephen Ross has done is whatever the folks have have asked him for, he's given it to them. One thing you can say about that man is he will open the wallet. And that's all I need an owner to do. Open the wallet and step back. And that's pretty much what he's done. A lot of folks will get upset and call him an absentee owner, but I don't want my owner digging into the football dynamics because he's not a football coach. People have to remember with these owners, with these guys, this is a secondary business for them. This is no more than owning a racehorse. They get their real money elsewhere. Now, I do like stats, and this is what I'm going to do right now because I think there's a point that needs to be proven. The game is called football for a reason. It's not called airball. No matter how much Roger Goodell wants to change the rules, it's still called football. And there's a point to be taken here. If you look at the NFL playoffs right now, and you look at the NFL playoffs every year, teams that can effectively run the football generally go to the playoffs, but not only go to the playoffs, they go deep into the playoffs. Why don't you take a look at the teams that are in the playoffs right now and ask yourself what they do well? They run the football and they play defense. And this isn't about necessarily all of the total yardage that a team gets running the football. It's about attempting to run the football to make a defense think that you will run the football, which enhances the play action passing game. And that's the entire point about Ryan Tannehill. He's not a drop back and sling the ball around 35 times a game passer. He may be able to do that here and there, but consistently, he's not that quarterback. And one thing you can prove throughout the years, whether it was Joe Philbin or Adam Gase, was the Miami Dolphins didn't attempt to run the football. They would abandon the running game at will. And when you force Ryan Tannehill to beat you during Miami's tenure, it just wasn't going to happen. And it was for obvious reasons. And people wanted to blame the offensive line. They wanted to blame everything else. But a lot of those sacks, I would say 25 to 40% of Ryan Tannehill's sacks were squarely on him. Now, there's a direct correlation in what I'm saying to the statistics. And if you look at it beginning in 2013, the Miami Dolphins were 29th in attempts, 22nd in attempts, 32nd in attempts under Joe Philbin. Beginning with Adam Gase, they were 18th in attempts, 32nd in attempts, and 25 in attempts. Guess what? That 2016 season that we were referring to was the season they were 18th in attempts. So is Ryan Tannehill's success in Tennessee surprising to me personally? No. There's folks that know me that will tell you that I fully expected Ryan Tannehill to take Marcus Mariota's job because Marcus Mariota cannot stay healthy. So let's talk back about Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry. Since Ryan Tannehill has started, Derrick Henry has rushed for almost 1,200 yards in 10 games. When you get that kind of output from your running back, witness Jay Ajayi, your quarterback just has to not turn the football over. You're not asking him to do a whole lot. That's like giving Trent Dilfer credit for Baltimore's run to the Super Bowl. Derrick Henry has rushed for almost 600 yards in 3 games while averaging 30 attempts. Does that sound familiar? Does that parallel another starting quarterback that needs a strong running game? The game will forever be called football for a reason. If you can run the ball and play defense, you have a chance to win. And the Titans have proven that. Now, will they do that this week? There's always a possibility that you can run the football, play defense, and win. But there's something unique about the Kansas City Chiefs. And they haven't faced that in the playoffs. What's different from Kansas City, between Kansas City and, say, a team like the Ravens, who were the number 1 offense in football, is the things you were able to do against the Ravens, you cannot do against Kansas City. Effectively, what the Tennessee Titans did against the Ravens was they kind of crowded the paint and forced Lamar Jackson to throw the ball outside the hashes to his wide receivers. And when you look at their wide receivers, he has Hollywood Brown and who? And then there becomes an arm strength and accuracy issue. So the question becomes, where are you going to force Patrick Mahomes to throw the football? The Chiefs had 4 touchdown drives last week that were less than a minute long. Let me rephrase that. Let me restate that. They had 4 touchdown drives that were less than 1 minute long. That's how you erase leads. The Tennessee Titans can open that game getting everything they want, They can have an 8-minute clock-killing drive that ends in a touchdown, and Patrick Mahomes can erase it in less than a minute. If the Titans are going to advance, Ryan Tannehill is going to have to show something he has never shown. He's going to have to win the game throwing the football. And we're not talking about throwing it exclusively. We're talking about when the pressure's on, a la those last 3 games of the season in Miami in 2018, you are going to have to play your best, and you are going to have to make plays with your feet and your legs. You're going to have to do what Patrick Mahomes does if you want to win this football game this week. And notice, I never said that I hate Ryan Tannehill, because once again, if you're going to drop an NFL quarterback, why not Ryan Tannehill? He can scramble, he can throw, and he's a big guy. So he's 30 years old and he can turn the corner. But he's going to have to do that because he simply did not do that in Miami. And to suggest anything else is revisionist history. Which brings us back to our point, which was coaching. Coaching in Miami should have recognized this. Joe Philbin and Adam Gase had adequate time in practice, in film study, in meetings, and everywhere else to evaluate Ryan Tannehill. And the rumor is, and understand that this is just a rumor, the rumor is that Joe Philbin wanted the Miami Dolphins to draft a quarterback to develop in addition to Ryan Tannehill. And the organization did not budge. Remember my statement about the New England Patriots and Tom Brady and drafting quarterbacks? If you do not have an elite franchise quarterback, you keep drafting until you find one. But you work with what you have. And what the Miami Dolphins should have done was relied a lot more on the running game. And that's squarely on coaching. Those players that I listed in part 1 of this series, they're all very good football players. And several of them are proving it elsewhere. And when I looked at the tape in Miami, they looked good in Miami. But we didn't hold on to them. We did not hold on to them because everybody wanted to make excuses for a poor coaching staff underutilizing the players that they did have. Now, does this include Ryan Tannehill? I think the argument can be made that Ryan Tannehill was not utilized to his strengths. But this narrative that he was an elite prospect in Miami or somebody that they should hold on to, that's just simply not true because they did try everything from a front office standpoint to surround him with talent. And if you look at the tape, Ryan Tannehill failed this team as much as the coaching staff failed Ryan Tannehill. Adam Gase and Joe Philbin's resume, that's easy to pick apart. And what I won't do is waste time doing a statistical analysis. Go back and look at Adam Gase's offensive rankings since he left Peyton Manning in Denver. And you can find the truth there. It's not difficult to look for. So what we're going to do moving forward is this is going to take us into part 3 in the offseason. Because I believe that this is the brightest future that I have seen in the Miami Dolphins. And I am a lifelong fan. Chris Grier and Brian Flores have enough assets on the roster currently, in free agency, and in the upcoming draft to turn this organization around for the next 10 years. And we're going to start digging into that on part 3 of this podcast. The Curious Case of Ryan Tannehill and the Miami Dolphins. Stay tuned.
City overpowers the country. Asphalt rolling over animals and trees. And y'all still sleep. Red dirt used for clay brick. The country overpowers the city on some rain shit. Broke it all down in the slot where the hogs be. Chickens in the backyard, dog on the ground sleep. Pond in the front yard, that's where the fish at. The city sold the country for their shit in the contract. Now they got beef, but the stock is the same world. Flexing on each other when they same girl. City made commerce to feed the illusion. Country didn't double up green with dead men. Fuel to the fire, they both got burnt quick. Screaming, God help me, and the devil made me do it. City and the country sold out for real cheap. Worry about each other when the beast gotta eat. The beast gotta eat, the beast gotta eat, the beast gotta eat, the beast gotta eat, the beast gotta eat.